It lives. Reanimated by fans, the ZX Spectrum marches on. I'm going to take a look at just a few, of the flood of new releases that keep on coming. New games that really push this Rainbow Revolutionary to the edge and keep it rocking in the 21st century. So to begin with, we really have to talk about Buzzsaw, demoed as early as 2009 and finally released in 2011, bringing with it a new era. Now, if you're not a Spectrum insider, you might wonder what's so special about this game. What does this do that's so groundbreaking? Well, in a word, it's multicolour. Yes, that playfield on the right seems to be showing more colours at once than it really should be able to. No more than 2 colours in any 8x8 pixel block. That was always the restriction, giving specky graphics that very distinctive and at times, well, fairly nightmarish look. Going all the way back to the 80s, coders had been dabbling in the dark arts and coming up with ways around this hardware limitation, but no one was ever really able to make it work in a game. Well, that is until Buzzsaw came along. Yes, okay, it's not the full screen, but the impossible seems to have been achieved. Shock and awe was the reaction. Surely this is sorcery. Programmer Jason Railton came perilously close to being burned as a witch by more traditionally minded specky fans, but well, thankfully wiser heads prevailed. It was not the sooty hands of old Nick, but clever programming that was behind this 8th wonder of the world of Spectrum, a trick that turned out to be about the biggest thing to happen in specky graphics since the trial by ordeal of the Stamper brothers. Doubly impressive considering it runs just flawlessly on the original unexpanded 48K Model 2. Of course, lots of programmers were soon keen to jump on the colourful bandwagon in the wake of Buzzsaw, and who could blame them with potential like this? The Spectrum's limits not just pushed, but shoved back quite a long way. In fact, it didn't take all that long for Buzzsaw's achievements to be thoroughly superseded, and Knights and Demons DX, released in 2013 by Kabuto Factory, was one of the games that took things to another level. Powered by Einar Sauker's Bifrost engine, this takes the ideas of Buzzsaw and really runs with them. Although once again not full screen, Knights and Demons goes mental, reducing the 2 colour restriction to just 8x1 pixel lines. I will concede that I've no real idea what's going on here, but my word, doesn't it look pretty. Like Buzzsaw, this is still though a fairly slow-paced puzzle game. It may laugh in the face of colour clash, but fast action is not what this is about. Could these new multicolour techniques be applied to, say, platform games? Well, yes, as it turns out, in fact, we're a bit spoiled for choice, but how about we take a look at 2014's El Stompo from Stone Chat Productions. This time powered by the Nirvana engine, once again the work of Einar Saukas. This gives up a bit of colour in exchange for a much larger playfield and much more action. An old school single screen platformer, your task is to move through the level stomping on the malfunctioning TV sets whilst avoiding the nasties. Going for 8x2 blocks of colour, this game looks, well, uncannily un-Spectrum-like, only the retina etching colour palette giving it away. In fact, stuffed with quirky details, this could almost pass for a Golden Age arcade game. The tiny TV programs on the tiny TVs are a particularly nice touch. The gameplay mechanics may not be massively deep, but it doesn't need to be for a lolloping old school arcade workout like this. There's enough variety and invention in the level design to keep things interesting for a good while, making this far more than just a colourful novelty. And again, just to really add finesse, this game runs just fine on the original 48K Spectrum, no extra hardware required. So where do we go from here? The horrors of colour clash beaten thoroughly into submission. Can things get any better? Well, let's take a look at Old Tower. Featuring an all-new multicolour engine created by Retro Souls coder Denis Grachev, Old Tower, released in 2018, goes further over the rainbow than any other specky game has gone before. Yes, scrolling was always a bit of a problem in these new breed of uber colour games, none of them really managing complex background scrolling outside of a few demos. Old Tower manages to bring it though with aplomb, buttery smooth vertical scrolling that would be the envy of any title, multicolour or no. It all looks incredibly slick too, the kind of cute minimalism that has become Retro Souls house style looks better than ever. Detailed sprites and an atmospheric backdrop that are given an extra boost by being so very colourful, at least by specky standards. Another game that I can pay the highest compliment to and say, well, it doesn't look much like a Spectrum game at all. Like some weird 8-bit system from a parallel universe, one that didn't get released in this timeline, the Sinclair Paradox maybe? Of course it plays really nicely too, a sort of modern retro puzzle platformer if that makes any sense, it taking more from today's indie titles than it does from Manic Miner. A game with a kind of 21st century sensibility, a 21st century learning curve too, a gently ramping, well thought out challenge. So at this point I could easily stay focused entirely on multicolour games. There's been enough released in the past decade or so to fill this and many other videos besides, but I think it's time for a change of pace, a different direction. A game that I couldn't let slip by in a video like this. Castlevania Spectral Interlude. The great thing about these post-mortem fan releases is that they can answer so many what-if questions. What if Konami inexplicably decided that the NES is not where it's at anymore and the old psychedelic biscuit tin was the only way forward? Well, it might have looked a bit like this. In fact, it's probably better, as most of Castlevania's official forays into home computers were a bit disappointing, and this is anything but. Yes, this is a totally unofficial fan-made thing, but it's got to be one of the most well-realised fan projects on any system. Although it started out life as a straight port of Simon's Quest, it became its own original game in the process, an entirely new and surprisingly authentic feeling entry into the series. Perhaps not quite as colourful as what we've seen so far, but even in the best hands, specky multicolour brings with it a lot of limitations, so it's nice to be reminded of what can be done when unfettered by the faff of such techniques. Yes, Spectral Interlude keeps the colour restrictions, but it impresses in so many other ways. An absolutely huge and intricately detailed world, stuffed with the sort of attention to detail that few specky games could boast, and of course, plenty of undead lashing action. That was always Castlevania's most gripping facet. The secret sauce was just how satisfying it was to control and to play, and this does a very pleasing rendition of those monster tussling manoeuvres. There's very little slowdown and flicker too, something the NES originals were hampered with, though we do have to deal with the dreaded up to jump, but given a one-button joystick that is sort of unavoidable. Now this game is fairly brutally difficult. I cheated like a Donkey Kong world record holder just to show you the first couple of levels. I guess that may be true to the original formula, but this does seem to be tuned to a slightly higher degree of sadism, rather more like specky games of yore in its level of challenge. Calling this a homebrew title absolutely doesn't do it justice though. With the graphics, the music, the amazing world building, this is frankly a better package than, well, nearly any commercial game from way back when. A neo-classic undoubtedly. Can we get any better than this? Well, no. Can we see something that's just as impressive? Well, yes, thankfully. It's Mighty Final Fight. Brought to us by a team including lead Spectral Interlude programmer Sanchez, this is a stunning conversion of Capcom's stripped-back, chibi-style micro-brawler. Doing everything you could wish for in an old-school 8-bit beat-em-up, it looks the part, it sounds fantastic, and it's not too saggy in the gameplay either. Like Spectral Interlude, this doesn't really do anything we didn't know the Spectrum could do from a tech point of view, but it nails every individual element so well that it seems to transcend the humble bounds of the old Technicolor T-Caddy quite spectacularly. Not a one-to-one port of the original NES title, but pretty close to it. All the levels are there and all 3 playable characters too. The Specky's twilight years were littered with unwise attempts to cram in massive games that were just never going to fit, US Gold's near unplayable official conversion of Final Fight being a prime example. That's what makes this version of the game so nice to see, something tailored to bring out the best in an old system rather than just signpost its shortcomings. And this really does put the system in a good light. Yeah, we have the colour clash and the unmistakable Spectrum look, but it wears it well. The sprites have come out looking good, but those huge backgrounds are maybe the biggest star in the show, superb recreations of the NES originals, even featuring the same animations. Though this is of course a totally unofficial conversion, it seems worthy of the Final Fight moniker, a game made to the same high standards that Capcom brought us even in its 8-bit NES outings. Again, I have to say that this is fairly difficult, perhaps more difficult than the original NES version, which was fairly light on challenge, but well, I'm probably nitpicking here. This is easily the best beat 'em up on the Specky since Target Renegade. It may even be better, it really is that good. So where to next? Well, it was always going to be hard to whittle this list down. The 8-bit Renaissance just keeps throwing up so many great games. I'm going to have to leave so much out. But well, this next title I just couldn't overlook. Fresh as a daisy, released in 2019 by Zoysa Entertainment, it's Valley of Renz. Does this look a bit like that major hype mega game Savage? Yes it does. In fact, this is obviously inspired by the unforgettable work of Dave Perry and Nick Brutti, who kicked the Specky to new heights towards the end of its commercial life with Savage and many others. But well, I think this beats even their best work, a worthy winner of the Yandex 2019 Retro Game Battle. Why was a Russian search engine sponsoring an apparently Spectrum-only retro game competition? We may never know, but let's just be glad they did, because it gave us this. A game that's determined to throw absolutely everything it can at the often neglected, whimsical fantasy run and gun genre. Tons of colour, massive sprites, loads of enemies, why not? Particle effects? Well, how could we do without that? Multiplane parallax scrolling? Well, we'll need that, and let's chuck in a few nice water tricks whilst we're at it. And yeah, let's keep it all running at top speed, and well, the only things we really need to leave out are that annoying flicker and colour clash. And you know what, in case this all sounds a bit low effort, let's make sure it all runs on the 48K model too. In fact, forget Savage, this is the Spectrum's Shadow of the Beast, except well, we've already had that. Okay then, this is the Spectrum's non-rubbish Shadow of the Beast, complete with oodles of parallax scrolling, and how the hell did they do that visuals? The only thing this game really misses is in-game music, but well, it's a 48K game, so that was never going to happen with its lack of sound chip. Yes, it pushes the limits of presentation, but thankfully it plays pretty nicely too. A refreshingly laid-back difficulty level, less knuckle-biting than the previous 2 games certainly, and maybe no bad thing too, giving you a sporting chance of seeing some of this game's very luscious later levels and finest graphical delights. Ah well, who's got the time to get good at old school games like this these days? This really is a bit of a marvel. Just when you think the old teletext acid trip has shown you everything it can, well, something like this comes along. And that seems like the perfect place to pull the plug on the Spectrum for now. I really had a hard time picking out stuff for this. It seems like everyone making games for the Spectrum these days is determined to push the limits. But I suppose that is the whole point of making games for these old systems today. It's all about the challenge. I have a feeling that this is something I'll come back to somehow, so do give me your suggestions below. I'm always up for new Specky games. So thanks for watching, and well, I'll see you next time maybe. And apologies to Einar Saukas, whose name I can't possibly be pronouncing correctly.